The chill of the glass conference table, the gleaming mahogany of my 45-year-old business, the 4 decades and 3 years of my entire life all felt heavy, suddenly vulnerable. The mediator's gold-tipped pen finally stopped moving, and I watched my younger brother's practiced, academic smile completely dissolve for the first time in 6 months. That morning had started like any other tense court day. I've been trapped in these mandatory mediation sessions. For 3 solid weeks, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments which country you're watching from. Let's see, listening to my little brother, Ethan, patiently explain why he deserved half of Crestline Cabinetry and millwork, the company I'd built from nothing but sweat equity and ambition while he was earning his 4th advanced degree in San Francisco. The mediator, a formidable woman named Dr. Lena Volkov, seemed distinctly sympathetic to his intellectualized case. Too sympathetic. I'd later uncover the devastating reason why, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really began. Not 6 months ago when Ethan filed his aggressive $7 million lawsuit. Not even 3 years ago when my father passed. This truly started 45 years ago in 1980 when I was a deeply ambitious 19-year-old and still naive enough to believe that backbreaking labor and a simple belief in family loyalty meant anything lasting. I had just completed my formal apprenticeship as a master carpenter in Edmonton. Dad was a foreman at the Imperial Oil Refinery. Mom taught at a small community college. We weren't exactly poor, but we certainly weren't comfortable. Ethan was a bright 11-year-old, already showing undeniable signs of being what my mother proudly called cognitively superior and what I privately termed constitutionally opposed to physical effort. Dad pulled me aside one crisp November night after a meager dinner of meatloaf. "Liam," he said, using my full name, which was rare. "Your brother is going places. University. Maybe graduate school. That boy is brilliant, but we can't afford to send 2 sons to university, especially not a second time." I nodded, feeling the rough calluses on my palms. "I've never been much for books anyway." "I know, Dad, but you have the hands of craftsman. You have a gift for wood. Why don't you start something for yourself? Something permanent." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a bank draft. $12,000 saved up. "It's yours if you want to build something real." $12,000. In 1980, that was enough to acquire a solid set of tools, rent a small, gritty warehouse space, and barely survive for about 8 months if I ate nothing but ramen and was ruthlessly careful. I took it. I named the business Crestline Cabinetry and millwork, and I threw myself into it, working 80-hour weeks for the first 7 years. Kitchen cabinets, detailed custom millwork for upscale homes, and built-ins for the sprawling new developments popping up all over Alberta during the booming energy sector expansion. By the time Ethan graduated from high school, I was employing 4 people. By the time he finished his first undergraduate degree at McGill, I had 13 full-time employees and had just secured my first major commercial contract, a massive hotel renovation downtown. By the time he received his PhD in financial economics from Stanford, I had meticulously built Crestline into the most respected, premier renovation and custom cabinetry business in Western Canada, employing 55 people and generating an annual revenue of $9.5 million. Ethan became a renowned professor of finance. Ironically, he taught at McGill for 15 years, then moved to the University of Toronto. He published highly theoretical papers about market derivatives and resource allocation models. He never once called to ask about the business, never once visited the workshop, and never showed any tangible interest in the empire I'd risked everything to build. Dad was proud of both of us, but in profoundly unequal ways. My professor's son and my entrepreneur's son, he would say at family Christmas dinners. But I noticed something over the decades. When Ethan came home, Dad's eyes would light up with a searing, pure pride they never quite did for me. When Ethan published another paper in a prestigious journal, Dad kept a meticulously framed copy on his desk. When I won the Edmonton Business Leader of the Year award in 2012, Dad merely clapped twice and said, "That's great, son. Solid work." Then he went right back to reading Ethan's latest abstract. I'm not complaining. I understood the dynamic. Ethan was the true success story, the cerebral son. I was just the guy who worked with his hands, covered in sawdust and sweat. Mom was tragically diagnosed with early onset dementia in 2019. Dad took care of her with relentless devotion for 3 years before his heart finally failed in March 2022. Ethan flew in from Toronto for the funeral, stayed for exactly 4 days, and flew back out. I was the one who personally moved Mom into the specialized memory care facility, the one who visited 4 times a week to sit with her, the one who paid the crippling $7,500 monthly fee because her complex care needs exceeded what the public system was structured to provide. Ethan contributed a token $600 a month. Professor's salary, Liam, he'd say over the phone. Not like you, the big, successful business tycoon. 6 months after Dad's funeral, Ethan called me. We need to discuss the business, Liam. I was in my truck, driving home from a grueling site inspection on the Anthony Hen Day. What about it? The 50-50 promise, the family legacy. I nearly drove the truck off the road and into a concrete barrier. What? Dad always said the business was for both of us. A Morrison family legacy. He told me that countless times over the years. Ethan, I built this business. Dad gave me $12,000 in 1980. That was his total contribution. Everything else is 45 years of my entire adult life. Dad said it was a family business. Family. That includes me. Liam, I never worked a single day at Crestline. Doesn't matter. Dad's promise matters. I've been patient, Liam. I've let you run things, make all the decisions, but now it's time to formalize the arrangement. I want 50% ownership, and I want it legally documented. I pulled over into a dimly lit Tim Hortons parking lot. Ethan, are you serious? Dead serious. You've had 45 years to build astronomical wealth. I've been in academia, making a tiny fraction of what you make. Dad knew that. He wanted to balance things out. He told me, Liam, multiple times, the business is for both my boys. Even if Dad said that, which I fundamentally doubt, it doesn't mean anything legally. The business is incorporated in my name. I have 45 years of tax returns, business registrations, everything. It's mine. We'll see what a top lawyer says. I'm giving you one last chance to do this the right way, Liam. The family way. 50/50 partnership, or I file a massive lawsuit for what Dad promised me. He hung up. I sat there for over an hour, watching people go in and out for their coffee, trying to process the tectonic shift that had just happened. My little brother, the intellectual I'd watched grow up, the one I'd helped fund for his second degree when his grants ran dry, was threatening to destroy everything I'd ever created. I call my wife Veronica. We'd been married for 40 beautiful years, raised 2 incredible kids who were now in their 40s with families of their own. He's bluffing, she insisted. Ethan is not that kind of person. He's your brother. But he wasn't bluffing. 2 weeks later, I received a statement of claim from a flashy law firm in Toronto. Ethan was suing me for 50% ownership of Crestline Cabinetry and Millwork, claiming that our father had made a verbal, binding promise for an equal split. He was also demanding $900,000 in back compensation for his theoretical ownership share over the past 10 years. The claim was over 100 pages long. It painted me as a manipulative older brother who had ruthlessly exploited family resources and parental favoritism to build a business that rightfully belonged to both of us. It meticulously claimed I had systematically excluded Ethan from all business decisions. Crucially, it claimed Dad had repeatedly and consistently promised Ethan half the business, listing specific dates and alleged conversations. Christmas 2016, Thanksgiving 2018, and Dad's 75th birthday in 2020. I read it 3 times, feeling physically ill with each pass. The dates were real, but the conversations? I had absolutely no memory of Dad ever saying anything remotely like that. And I had been at all those core family gatherings. Surely, I would have heard if Dad had promised Ethan half of my life's work. I hired a fierce litigation attorney, Miss Sarah Jenkins, one of the absolute best in Edmonton. She read the claim and pursed her lips, a look of grim determination on her face. This is going to be incredibly expensive, Liam. He's asking for mandatory mediation first, which is standard in Alberta for commercial disputes under $10 million. If mediation fails, we go directly to trial. Can he win? Can you actually take a multi-million-dollar business with only a verbal promise? In Alberta, it's monumentally difficult, but not utterly impossible. If he can prove your father made a clear, specific promise, and that promise was intended to create legal obligations, and that Ethan relied on that promise to his detriment, then, yes, it's possible. It's called promissory estoppel, but the burden of proof is exceptionally high. Your 45 years of sole ownership and tax filings help us immensely, but if a judge believes your father made a binding promise, ownership records might not completely matter. The question is, did your father promise Ethan half the business? I thought about it deeply. Dad had used the phrase, "the business is for my boys," a few times over the years, usually after a couple of strong drinks during the holidays, talking vaguely about legacy and family. But it was never specific. It was never, "Ethan, you own half." It was the vague, misty-eyed sentimentality of an aging man who just wanted his sons to love each other. Maybe, I admitted. Dad said some things over the years, but nothing concrete, nothing legal. Sarah nodded. That's what Ethan is banking on. The vagueness works in his favor. He can claim Dad meant ownership. You can claim Dad meant emotional legacy. It boils down to a classic she said scenario, except your father is no longer here to clarify. So, we go to mediation and hope we can settle for something remotely reasonable. If not, we prepare for the fight of our lives. I spent the next grueling month diving into 45 years of documents. I was searching for a fortress of paperwork that could defend my life's work. I found the original $12,000 bank draft from Dad, dated October 1st, 1980. I found letters Dad had sent me over the decades, mostly standard birthday cards and occasional Christmas notes. One card from 1997 said, "Proud of what you've built, son. Crestline is something truly special. Keep going." Another from 2008 read, "Crestline is an absolute testament to your grit, hard work, and singular vision." None of them mentioned Ethan. None of them hinted at shared ownership. I made a heartbreaking call to Mom's memory care facility and tried desperately to talk to her about it. She was having an exceptionally difficult day. "Who are you?" she asked, her eyes blank. "Where is Harold?" Harold was my father. She'd been asking for him for 3 years. She was no help. She was simply gone. Mediation was scheduled for late November, nearly a year after Dad's passing. The mediator was Dr. Lena Volkov, a sharp-minded, 62-year-old former family court judge specializing in high-value business disputes. She came highly, almost universally, recommended. The first session was held in a stark, intimidating conference room in a towering downtown Calgary office building. Ethan arrived looking annoyingly calm, accompanied by his high-priced lawyer, a slick man named Richard Tate from Toronto. They sat across from Sarah Jenkins and me as if we were negotiating a corporate takeover, not finalizing the bitter destruction of family. Dr. Volkov started with the standard mediator's prologue. "I'm here to help you facilitate a resolution that both parties can realistically live with. This isn't a courtroom. I can't compel anyone to do anything, but I can help you find common ground." Ethan spoke first. His voice was utterly calm, reasonable, the same measured professorial tone he probably used when lecturing his financial economics students. "Liam, I don't want this to be adversarial. We are brothers, but Dad made a promise, and I simply need you to honor it. He told me countless times that the business was for both of us. He saw my academic career, saw that I wasn't generating the kind of generational wealth you were, and he wanted to equalize things. That was his wish, his legacy intent." I stared at my brother. He looked completely, genuinely sincere. That was the most infuriating, gut-wrenching part. He seemed to truly believe this fantasy. "Ethan, I've been running Crestline for 45 years. You've never worked there. You've never even stepped foot in the main workshop. When did this critical promise supposedly happen?" It wasn't a single conversation, Liam. It was years of conversations. Dad would talk to me about the business, about how it was a Morrison family asset, and how he wanted both his sons to be financially cared for. The specific times are in the claim. Christmas 2016. He sat me down and distinctly said, "Ethan, don't worry. The business will be there for you. Liam knows it's for both my boys. Thanksgiving 2018, same thing. His 75th birthday, he said it again. I was at all those family events. I don't remember Dad saying that. You were busy talking to Veronica's family or constantly fielding work calls. These were private conversations, Liam, just father and son. Dr. Volkov intervened, her expression professional but firm. Let's focus on finding a solution. Ethan, what does a fair resolution look like to you now? 50% ownership, formally documented in legal papers. I'm willing to let Liam continue as the CEO and handle all day-to-day operations. I don't need to be involved in management, but I want my ownership stake recognized, and I want to begin receiving 50% of the quarterly profits. Sarah Jenkins interjected sharply. That is absolutely absurd. Crestline Cabinetry generates approximately $1,300,000 in annual profit. You're asking for $650,000 a year for contributing nothing. I'm asking for what my father promised me, Ethan stated calmly. I found my voice, shaking slightly with controlled fury. Even if Dad said something remotely like that, which I am not conceding, wouldn't it make more sense to interpret it as me simply helping you out if you ever fell on hard times, not literally giving you half the business I built? Ethan shook his head with an air of profound disappointment. Dad was specific, Liam. He said the business was for both of us, not help Ethan if he needs it. He said we were both owners. The first mediation session ended with zero progress and a massive escalation of tension. Dr. Volkov scheduled 2 more sessions over the next month. Between sessions, I couldn't sleep a wink. I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, tormented by those family gatherings Ethan had mentioned. I tried desperately to recall Dad's exact words. Had he, after a few drinks, said something that could genuinely be twisted into a legal promise? I'd always been busy hosting, talking to everyone. Had I missed something utterly critical? Veronica noticed my decline. You're not eating. You're not sleeping. This is physically killing you. If I lose this case, I lose absolutely everything, I muttered. The business is currently valued at nearly $9 million. If Ethan gets half, I either have to buy him out for $4.5 million, which I don't have, or I have to sell the business entirely and split the proceeds. Either way, Crestline Cabinetry is finished. Ethan wouldn't actually destroy the business, would he? He's your brother. I honestly don't think I know my brother anymore. The second mediation session was significantly worse. Dr. Volkov seemed to have completely crystallized her sympathy for Ethan's position. She kept returning to phrases like family promises, moral obligations, and your father's profound wishes. Liam, she pressed, leaning forward. Even if there is some ambiguity in what your father said, don't you feel some deep obligation to honor his intent? He clearly wanted both his sons to benefit equally from the business. I felt my blood pressure spike dangerously high. His intent was for me to build something and be successful, which I achieved. I've given Ethan financial help over the years. I helped pay for his second degree. I've covered Mom's care facility costs far beyond what he contributes. I have been a good brother. But you've never offered him any stake in the business. Because it's my business. I built it. Every single cabinet, every single complex contract, every single employee hired, every single financial crisis survived, that was me. Not Dad, not Ethan. Me. Dr. Volkov looked genuinely disappointed in me, as if I were failing a simple moral test. Family businesses often involve these kinds of informal, handshake arrangements, Liam. Courts recognize that not everything needs to be meticulously written down. Sometimes a father's word to his son is enough. That was the moment the bitter realization hit me. She had already fundamentally made up her mind. She believed Ethan deserved something, maybe not the full 50%, but something extremely substantial. And as a mediator, she was expertly steering us toward that predetermined outcome. Sarah Jenkins noticed the shift as well. After the session, she pulled me into a hallway. I don't like this, Liam. Volkov is exhibiting clear bias. If she formally recommends a settlement and you reject it, that could look terrible if we proceed to trial. Judges sometimes give heavy weight to a mediator's formal recommendations. What do I do? We need evidence, Sarah. Hard, objective evidence. Something that proves conclusively that my father did not intend for Ethan to have ownership. Letters, legal documents, third-party witnesses, anything. I spent another frantic week digging through decades of sealed files. I found business loans from the 1980s and 1990s, all exclusively in my name. I found the original business registration from 1980. I found tax returns going back 45 years, all showing me as the sole proprietor, and after incorporation in 1993, the sole shareholder. But then I also found something else, something small, innocuous, yet potentially monumental. A letter from Dad dated 2010, tucked away in a dusty box of old personal papers, addressed to me, handwritten in his characteristic messy scrawl. Liam, just wanted you to know how immensely proud I am. Crestline Cabinetry is absolute proof that hard work and total dedication pay off. You took my $12,000 and transformed it into something truly remarkable. That's all you, son. Your vision, your sweat, your success. Keep building. Love, Dad. I read it 6 times. That's all you, son. Your vision, your sweat, your success. Not your and Ethan's success. Not our family business, but your success. I brought the letter immediately to Sarah. She smiled, a glimmer of genuine relief in her eyes. This is excellent, Liam. This is very, very good. It shows your father, before his final years, viewed the business as yours and yours alone, not as a joint family asset. The third and final mediation session was scheduled for December 15th, just 2 weeks before Christmas, nearly 2 years since Dad had passed. The final battle was about to begin. That morning, December 15th, I arrived early. I sat in my truck in the parking lot, holding Dad's 2010 letter in my hand. I thought about calling Ethan, trying one last time to reason with him before we walked into the lion's den. But what could I possibly say? We had exhausted every reasonable argument. I walked into the conference room. Ethan was already seated, looking utterly composed and confident. Richard Tate was reviewing a formidable stack of documents. Dr. Volkov was setting up her laptop, projecting an air of stern authority. We sat down. Sarah Jenkins placed Dad's letter carefully on the table, face up. Before we begin the financial negotiations, she announced, her voice crisp and professional, I'd like to formally introduce some new evidence. This is a personal letter from Harold Morrison to my client, Liam Morrison, dated June 2010. I'll read the relevant portion. She read Dad's words aloud, letting them hang in the silent room. That's all you, son. Your vision, your sweat, your success. Ethan's facial expression didn't change at all, but I watched his lawyer, Richard Tate, lean over and whisper a quick, agitated instruction to him. Dr. Volkov frowned slightly. That's certainly interesting, Ms. Jenkins, but it's from 2010. Ethan's claim involves specific statements allegedly made between 2016 and 2020. Your father's views could have fundamentally changed in that decade. Certainly possible, Sarah conceded smoothly, but it establishes a clear pattern. Harold Morrison viewed Crestline Cabinetry as Liam's business, Liam's success, not a joint family asset. One sentimental letter doesn't disprove years of consistent verbal promises, Richard Tate countered, his tone dismissive. Perhaps not, Sarah replied, pulling out a thick, sealed folder from a briefcase. But let's talk directly about those verbal promises. Ethan claims his father made clear, specific statements on specific dates. Christmas 2016, Thanksgiving 2018, and Harold Morrison's 75th birthday in March 2020. He claims these were private conversations, just father and son. That is correct, Ethan confirmed, his voice measured. Sarah opened the folder. I've subpoenaed Harold Morrison's full medical records from his family physician, Dr. Julian Kim, covering the period from 2013 until his death in 2022. Dr. Volkov looked up sharply, her air of composure finally cracking. Medical records? What possible relevance does this have to a commercial dispute? It has everything to do with contractual capacity, Sarah stated, her voice hardening. Harold Morrison was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease in November 2014. The room plunged into a profound silence. Dr. Kim's notes indicate a documented cognitive decline beginning as early as 2013, with a formal, informed diagnosis in late 2014. The family was officially informed. The recommended treatment plan included close monitoring, specific medication, and Sarah flipped rapidly through the pages. The explicit instruction that family members should document any major decisions or promises, as the patient may experience severe confusion about previous statements. Ethan was visibly shaking, his face drained of color. That's not. Dad didn't have Alzheimer's. Mom did. Your mother was officially diagnosed much later, in 2019, Sarah corrected him, her voice quiet but devastating. Your father was diagnosed 5 years earlier. The family was told. Were you not informed, Ethan? I remembered. The doctor's appointment in 2014, just before Christmas. Dad had asked me to come with him. Early stages, Dr. Kim had said, he'll have good days and bad days. He might repeat stories. He might forget recent conversations, but he's still capable of managing his immediate affairs for now. I'd been the one handling Dad's affairs after that. The bills, the complex prescriptions, the eventual decision to move Mom into care. I had simply assumed Ethan knew about Dad's diagnosis. He was in Toronto, visiting maybe 3 times a year. Maybe I'd never explicitly used the word Alzheimer's to him. Let's examine the dates of the alleged promises, Sarah continued, pulling no punches. The Christmas 2016 conversation Ethan describes. Harold Morrison's medical notes from December 2016 clearly indicate he was experiencing increased confusion and notable short-term memory loss. The doctor specifically noted that Harold was struggling to distinguish recent events from past events and was occasionally making statements inconsistent with reality. She pulled out more pages. Thanksgiving 2018. Harold Morrison had a minor stroke 3 weeks prior. Hospital records show a clear period of temporary cognitive impairment. His doctor noted the patient was experiencing disorientation and confabulation. March 2020, Harold's 75th birthday. By this point, Harold Morrison's Alzheimer's had progressed to the moderate stage. Dr. Kim's notes from February 2020 state, patients should not be making financial or legal decisions without direct family oversight. Cognitive functions significantly impaired. Ethan was dead white. I didn't know. Dad seemed fine at those gatherings. He was talking, joking, remembering stories. Alzheimer's patients often seem perfectly fine in social situations, Sarah said, not unkindly. They can skillfully mask symptoms, especially early on. But the objective medical evidence is absolutely clear. Your father was not cognitively capable of making binding legal promises during the entire time period you described. And even if he said something, a promise made by someone with documented cognitive impairment cannot legally form the basis of a binding agreement. Dr. Volkov was rapidly reading the medical summaries, her expression now showing shock and professional embarrassment. I was not made aware of this diagnosis. This fundamentally changes the entire analysis. Richard Tate was speed reading through the documents, his face contorted in disbelief. Even if Harold Morrison had cognitive issues, that doesn't automatically invalidate everything he said. The diagnosis was 2014, Sarah cut him off. The promises Marcus claims were made between 2016 and 2020, well after the formal diagnosis. And the letter I presented earlier from 2010 shows that before his illness, Harold Morrison explicitly viewed the business as Liam's alone. I looked at my brother. The professor, the intellectual, the adversary, all were gone. He was staring at the table, his supreme confidence utterly evaporated. Ethan, I said quietly, the anger draining out, replaced by a deep, weary pity. Did Dad really say those things? Or did you just hear what you wanted to hear? He looked up, and for the first time in months, I saw my little brother. His eyes were wet. He said it, Liam. I swear he did. Christmas 2016. We were in the kitchen, just the two of us. He put his heavy hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, Ethan. The business is for both my boys. Liam knows it's going to be there for you." I remember it perfectly. I believe you remember it, I said gently. But Dad had Alzheimer's, Ethan. He was confused. Maybe he was thinking about the $12,000 he gave me, and somehow, in his confused mind, he thought that meant the business belonged to both of us. Maybe he was just trying to make you feel better about your professor salary. But it wasn't a promise. It wasn't real. Ethan's voice was a barely audible whisper. He said it every single time I visited. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, he'd pull me aside and tell me not to worry, that I'd be completely taken care of, that the business was ours. I thought it meant something concrete. It meant Dad loved you, I said. It meant he wanted you to feel secure. But it was not a legal promise, and it was never the reality of Crestline. Dr. Volkov cleared her throat, her demeanor now professional and decisive. Given this profoundly critical medical evidence, I do not believe mediation is likely to result in any settlement favorable to Ethan Morrison's position. If this proceeds to trial, a judge will almost certainly find that Harold Morrison lacked the capacity to make any binding promises during the relevant period. Richard Tate was already packing his briefcase with practice speed. I need to urgently consult with my client. We took a break. Sarah and I went to a coffee shop across the street. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I ordered coffee. Did you know about your father's diagnosis? Sarah asked. I knew. I've been managing it for so long. It just became normal. I didn't connect it to how it affected conversations from years ago. I honestly didn't think Ethan didn't know. He had to have known. Perhaps he knew and conveniently chose to forget because it fundamentally complicated his claim, Sarah suggested. Her eyes narrowed. I didn't want to believe that. I desperately wanted to believe my brother had been genuinely mistaken, that he'd heard Dad's confused ramblings and mistakenly thought they were ironclad promises. We went back to the conference room. Ethan and his lawyer were already there. Ethan looked smaller, defeated. Richard Tate spoke first. In light of the highly specific medical evidence presented, we are prepared to discuss a settlement. Ethan is no longer pursuing an ownership claim. However, we believe there is still a powerful moral obligation to acknowledge the initial family contribution to the business. We are proposing a one-time payment of $600,000 in recognition of Harold Morrison's initial investment and the family legacy. Sarah scoffed openly. You mean in recognition of Ethan's failed, devastating lawsuit? That is absolutely not happening. Liam, Ethan interjected, ignoring the lawyers entirely. Dad gave you $12,000 in 1980. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $40,000 in today's money. The business is worth $9 million. Dad's investment started all of this. Don't I deserve something for that? You want me to pay you $600,000 because Dad gave me $12,000 45 years ago? Money I've paid back 100 times over in helping you with your academic career, in covering Mom's extreme care costs, in being the son who actually stayed in Edmonton and looked after our parents. I want recognition that this isn't solely your success. It's built on family support. Every business is built on some kind of family support, Ethan. Every success story starts with someone helping someone else. But that doesn't mean you own my business. Dr. Volkov tried to mediate weekly, perhaps a smaller amount. Liam? A gesture of family goodwill. I felt something finally snap inside me. No. Everyone looked at me, stunned by the sheer finality of the word. No. I repeated, my voice strong and level. I'm not paying Ethan anything. Not $600,000, not $60,000, not $6,000. You know why? Because this malicious lawsuit has cost me over $100,000 in legal fees so far. It has cost me sleep, my peace of mind, and nearly 2 years of my life. It has permanently damaged my relationship with my brother, maybe forever. And for what? Because Dad, in his confusion, said some vague, loving things about family that Ethan ruthlessly twisted into a claim of ownership. I pulled out my phone and opened my meticulously organized banking app. You want to talk about family contribution? Let's talk numbers. From 2019 to 2025, Mom's specialized memory care costs totaled $562,500. I paid $505,000 of that. You paid $37,500. That's money I pulled directly out of the business, out of my personal retirement savings, to care for our mother while you sent your token $600 monthly check and visited twice a year. I scrolled through more detailed records. Your second master's degree, 1996 to 1998. When your funding suddenly fell through, I loaned you $20,000. You repaid $7,000. That was almost 30 years ago, Ethan. I never asked for the rest back. 2009, when you were between academic positions and couldn't make your expensive mortgage payment, I sent you $15,000. 2015, when your car died and you needed a down payment on a new German sedan, $8,000. 2021, during the peak of the global health crisis when a university cut your salary by 25%, I sent you $2,000 a month for 9 months. That's $18,000 more. I put my phone down on the table with a sharp click. I have given you over $583,000 over the past 30 years, Ethan. Some as loans you never repaid, some as gifts. I never kept a ledger. I never held it over your head, because that's what family is supposed to do. But now you're sitting here demanding $600,000 more because Dad's Alzheimer's made him say confused things about a business you've never contributed one single hour to. The room was utterly silent. Ethan's voice was barely a choked whisper. I didn't remember all that, Liam. Of course you didn't, because I never made you remember. I helped because you're my brother. But apparently, that means nothing to you. Richard Tate stood up instantly. I think we are unequivocally done here. Ethan, we should discuss your final options. There are no options, Sarah Jenkins said, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. If you proceed to trial, Liam will present the medical evidence, the 45 years of business records, and this documentation of his extraordinary financial support to Ethan over decades. No judge in Alberta will rule in your favor. You will lose, and you will be responsible for Liam's mounting legal costs, which are currently $105,000 and climbing. Ethan stood up slowly. He looked at me, and I finally saw the vulnerable 11-year-old brother looking up to me again. I'm sorry, Liam, he said, his voice thick with tears. I don't know what I thought. Dad said those things, and I just wanted them to be true. I wanted there to be something for me, some absolute security beyond my professor pension. I wanted to matter in the family business. You could have just asked, Ethan. If you had come to me and said, Liam, I'm genuinely struggling. Can you help? I would have helped. I always have. But you didn't ask. You demanded. You sued me. I know, he whispered. He looked at his lawyer. Richard, withdraw the lawsuit. It's over. Marcus, I'd advise you to. It's over. My brother is right. I let Dad's confused ramblings become something they were never intended to be. I convinced myself I deserved half of something I never built. He looked back at me, his eyes full of pain and regret. I'm sorry, Liam. I don't expect you to ever forgive me. I just need you to know I'm sorry. He walked out quickly. Richard Tate gathered his papers and followed, avoiding eye contact. Dr. Volkov looked profoundly uncomfortable. I apologized, Liam. I should have investigated the family circumstances more thoroughly before forming my initial impressions. I just nodded, too weary to speak. She left. Sarah Jenkins was grinning, a fierce victory radiating off her. That, Liam, is what we call a complete and total victory. But it didn't feel like victory at all. It felt like I had just utterly lost my brother. Veronica was waiting anxiously when I got home. I told her every single devastating detail. She held my hand tightly and didn't say anything for a very long time. Are you okay? She finally whispered. I don't know, I admitted, staring past her. I won, but I feel like I lost something immeasurably bigger. My brother, my family structure, Dad's gone. Mom doesn't even remember my name half the time. And now Ethan and I don't know if we can ever come back from this betrayal. He apologized, Veronica pointed out. He apologized only after his lawyer told him he couldn't possibly win. That's not what I call real remorse, Veronica. That's just the intellectual acceptance of total defeat. People are complicated, Liam, she said, her voice gentle but insistent. Maybe Ethan genuinely misunderstood. Maybe Dad's Alzheimer's disease created this entire catastrophic situation. Maybe your brother isn't some calculating villain. Perhaps he's just someone who made a terrifying, selfish mistake. I thought about that simple statement for days. Christmas arrived. Ethan didn't call. I didn't call him either, but I sent him a thoughtful card and a small gift, just as I had done every year since we were kids. He didn't send one back. 3 weeks later, I received a letter. It was handwritten on Ethan's official university letterhead, but the penmanship was shaky and deeply personal. Liam, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and you certainly have no reason to. I've been doing an enormous amount of thinking since the mediation ended. I talked to my therapist, to some colleagues who are also experts in family dispute mediation, desperately trying to understand what happened. I think I completely created a narrative in my head based on Dad's confused, loving statements. And I convinced myself it was real because I so desperately wanted it to be real. I wanted to feel like I mattered in a tangible financial sense, like I was a real part of your astounding success. That was selfish, delusional, and fundamentally wrong. I should have been proud of you. I should have celebrated the monumental thing you built instead of trying to ruthlessly claim undeserved credit for it. I don't expect or deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm currently in intensive therapy. I am working extremely hard on understanding why I did this, and I will spend the rest of my life regretting the pain I inflicted on you. If you ever, for any reason, want to talk, I am here. Your brother, Ethan. I read the letter 4 times. I showed it to Veronica. What do you think? I asked her, my voice weary. I think he means it, she said, nodding slowly. I think he's horrified by what he did, and he's genuinely trying to make true amends. Is sorry enough? I don't know. That's entirely up to you. I didn't call Ethan. Not that day. Not that week. But I kept the letter. 2 months later, in March 2025, I received the call I knew was coming. It was the memory care facility. Mom had passed away peacefully in her sleep. I called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. Liam, Mom died this morning. A long silence followed. Then, I'll be on the first flight tomorrow. What do you need me to do? We planned the funeral together over the next 3 days. We were grimly efficient, professional, like 2 disconnected business partners. I handled the funeral home and the complicated service arrangements. He handled the obituary, the eulogy, and contacting distant relatives. We didn't talk about the colossal failure of the lawsuit. At the funeral service, Ethan sat right next to me. During the eulogy, which was beautifully delivered by our son, he started quietly crying. I simply put my heavy, calloused hand on his shoulder, the same way Dad used to do to both of us when we were just kids. After the service, we stood together by Mom's elegant rosewood casket. I'm sorry, Ethan said, his voice raw. Not just for the lawsuit, for everything. For not being here more when Mom was sick, for not helping more with Dad, for being the son who left and simply expected you to handle every single crisis. I don't want to talk about the lawsuit today, Ethan. I know. I need you to know I regret it. I regret all of it. We buried Mom next to Dad at Queens Park Cemetery in Edmonton. Family land, Veronica called it. The plot where generations of Morrison family members rested. A week later, Ethan called me. Can we have coffee, Liam? Just talk. We met at a Tim Hortons, the same chain where I'd sat almost 2 years earlier, agonizingly processing his statement of claim. We ordered coffee and sat across from each other in the exact same kind of cheap plastic booth. I've been thinking about Dad's letter, Ethan said, stirring his coffee slowly. The one from 2010. Your vision, your sweat, your success. That's what it said, right? Yeah. He was right. Ethan confessed. It was all you. And I tried to take that away from you because I was pathologically jealous. I stirred my own coffee, watching the steam curl. Why were you jealous, Ethan? You had a great career, a prestigious life. I was the smart son, the educated one, the one who was supposed to do great things. But you're the one who built something solid, something real, something that employs 55 people, something that creates lasting physical value, something that will exist in the world after you're gone. I wrote theoretical papers that maybe 20 people actually read. You built Crestline Cabinetry. Your papers mattered, Ethan. You taught hundreds of students. It wasn't enough, he repeated quietly. It was never enough. And when Dad started getting confused, started saying those vague, loving things about the business being for both of us, I latched onto it. I created this massive, convenient story in my head where I deserved half because Dad had always wanted to balance things between us. It was delusional. Maybe not delusional, I said. Maybe just human. Ethan looked at me, his gaze pleading. Can we start over, Liam? Not forget what happened, but start building something new? I don't want to lose my brother over this terrible mistake. I thought about Dad's confused promises, about Ethan's lawsuit, about the almost 2 years of relentless stress and the $105,000 in legal fees. I thought about 45 years of building a business, of being the son who stayed, of taking care of our aging parents. I don't know if we can go back to what we were, I said honestly. That level of trust is completely broken. But maybe we can figure out what we can be now. That's all I'm asking. We talked for over 2 hours about Dad, about Mom, about our respective kids, and about the uncertain future. We didn't resolve everything. Some deep wounds take a monumental amount of time to heal, but it was a crucial, defining start. A month later, I did something I had never remotely thought I'd do. I called Ethan and made him an unexpected offer. I'm seriously contemplating retirement, Ethan, I told him. I'm 64 now. I've been running Crestline for 45 years. I'm tired. My knees hurt from years on concrete floors. I want to travel the world with Veronica while we still can. That makes perfect sense, Liam, he replied. I'm going to gradually transition the business to my senior managers over the next 5 years, sell them shares gradually, let them buy me out. But before I do that, I want to set up a significant scholarship fund at the University of Alberta. $150,000 to start, specifically for carpentry and trade students who want to start their own businesses. I'd like to name it the Harold Morrison Memorial Trades Scholarship. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, processing the generosity and the intention behind it. That is a beautiful idea, Liam. Truly. I'd like you to help administer it, I continued. You're the academic. You know exactly how university scholarships and endowments work. It would be a concrete, positive way for both of us to honor Dad's memory and legacy together. I'd be honored. Genuinely. There's one key condition, though, I added. What is it? You have to come to the workshop. You have to actually see the business you try to take half of, meet the people who work there, and finally understand what I actually built. I like that very much, he said. He came the following week. I gave him a full, detailed tour of Crestline Cabinetry and millwork, starting in a massive cutting room where the smell of cedar and maple hung heavy in the air. I showed him the intricate workshop where we built custom, high-end cabinets, the elegant showroom where discerning clients came to view our craftsmanship, and the administrative offices where my managers planned complex projects. He met my employees, some of whom had been with me for over 25 years. They were part of my life, part of the fabric of the business. At the end of the tour, standing amidst a stack of freshly milled lumber, Ethan looked at me, his eyes wide with a new kind of understanding. I didn't understand, he admitted, shaking his head slowly. I really didn't. This isn't just a business, Liam. It's 45 years of relationships, of specialized craftsmanship, of your life poured into wood and concrete. It's what Dad's $12,000 became when someone actually put in the relentless, back-breaking work. I am truly sorry I tried to take it. I know you are, I replied. We successfully set up the Harold Morrison Memorial Trade Scholarship that summer. The first recipient was a bright young woman from Grande Prairie who wanted to start a custom furniture restoration business. At the formal awards ceremony, Ethan and I stood together on the stage, sharing a microphone as we spoke about Dad's belief in hard work. For the first time in 3 years, we looked like brothers again. Not the brothers we had been before the lawsuit. Those naive brothers were permanently gone. But perhaps something stronger. Brothers who had been through the fire of betrayal and conflict and come out scarred, yet still standing together. Veronica asked me once if I had completely forgiven Ethan. I thought about it for a long, quiet time before finally answering. I forgive him for being human, Veronica, I said. For being deeply jealous, for being weak in his moment of need, for making a terrible mistake. But I can never forget what he did. I can't forget the year of profound stress, the physical feeling of being utterly betrayed by my own brother, the devastating realization that family loyalty has limits and conditions. Is that enough, Liam? It has to be, I said. because the only real alternative is losing him completely, and I don't want that either. Ethan and I talk every couple of weeks now. We have dinner once a month. We work diligently on the scholarship together. We visited Mom's grave on what would have been her 87th birthday. We are consciously building something new, something fundamentally different from what we had before. I still keep Dad's precious letter from 2010 locked in my desk drawer. Your vision, your sweat, your success. On the hard days when the old, weary anger surfaces, I read it and remember the core, indisputable truth. The business was mine. I built it, and no amount of revisionist history or confused, sentimental promises can ever change that fact. Crestline Cabinetry and millwork will be sold entirely to my managers by 2032. I'll retire, travel with Veronica, and spend time with my beloved grandchildren. The business will continue under its new ownership, a new vision. That feels perfectly right. And Ethan will remain in my life, in whatever capacity we can responsibly manage. Not as close as we once were, but certainly not completely lost either. Somewhere carefully in between, because that is ultimately what family is in the end. Not easy perfection, not unconditional trust, not some fairy tale of harmony, but just people doing their absolute best, making massive mistakes, hurting each other profoundly, and then trying desperately to find a complicated way forward. I'm 64 years old now. I've built a lasting business, raised a wonderful family, and survived an existential lawsuit from my own brother. I've learned that meticulous documentation matters vastly more than assumed trust. I've learned that family promises need to be absolutely in writing. And I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean instantaneous forgetting. But I've also learned that people are incredibly complicated, that motivations are often tangled and messy, and that sometimes the villain in your own story is just your confused little brother who made a terrible, desperate mistake. I don't know if that's called wisdom or just profound exhaustion, but it's where I've finally landed. And for now, that's enough.